I'm having a hard time starting this one. One of the reasons for that is this is just enormously complicated and everything is really deeply interconnected. So I feel like I'm just going to miss something. There's no way to avoid it. Um, where I want to start is imagine, let's sort of look at how the liturgy and the cultural documents sort of present the Sakyong. I don't have the texts handy. I threw them all out in the street in Mexico City. Um, they may or may not have made it to a landfill, and I don't care. So I partially regret that, because I no longer have them as reference material. Um, Maybe some of you can send me some of the better ones. If somebody's got a copy of the memoirs of Sir Nyingma Sangpo they want to send me, we can go over that. I know I'm kind of burying the lead here. What I'm going to be doing today is covering the report that Carol Murchison and some other attorneys did for a case that's happening in Vermont right now that's ongoing. So this was a document that was presented directly to the court, so it's fairly well researched, and the people who did it definitely know how to validate claims and things like that. And I've been meaning to do this for a couple of weeks. I got sick last week and wasn't able to put out a video, and now I've just kind of been avoiding it because there's no way to adequately cover this topic. But I am starting to understand why this channel exists and what I'm trying to accomplish here, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. I'm going to try really hard, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it across to people who didn't live it or who weren't close enough to understand this. And I think some of you who are watching this will have these experiences much more deeply than I do, and others will not have touched on to these things. But I get increasingly frustrated by especially like the male boomer students of Trungpa who think that everything was just fine. Those seem to be the worst ones. Even if they sort of think, oh, what the Sakyong did was bad, they have this need to rationalize that Trungpa was actually truly great or whatever. And that's going to be a very difficult position to defend. So it's going to take a long time to kind of go through all of these things. And to kind of paint this picture, but I think we need to look at how he was actually presented. And both of them, because as Sakyong, they sort of were supposedly the same in that quality. But in one of the texts, I think it's I don't remember what they call it, the letter of the Black Ashe, maybe? I think it's the letter of the Black Ashe, where it talks about the barbarians and basically the good people and the bad people, and it's because of misunderstanding your nature. But it says in there, the glorious Rigden sent down a messenger, a glorious Sakyong warrior, something along those lines. And this theme of sent down by the Rigdens is really important in understanding why they're so full of shit. Because if this Sakyong warrior, the profound, brilliant, just, powerful, all-victorious Sakyong, and that's how he's presented throughout Shambhala, once you get past the point where they realize that they've gotten you the hooks deeply enough into you that they can start talking that way, then they do. And those of you who went to, Shambhala training level 1 through 5 or whatever, maybe kind of surprised that this is actually what they tell you. But so there's also the loyal toasts, which are these toasts that are given at formal events, and there are different versions depending on how deeply indoctrinated you are. And the most, I don't remember all of the words, but I remember being shocked by it when I went to Kalapa Assembly, because the words of the loyal toast in the Kalapa Assembly, like the highest Shambhala context, societal Shambhala context, starts with the phrase, to the heavenly appointed. Okay, now that sounds almost theistic for those of you who spent 10 years listening to the non-theism bullshit from Trungpa. Who appointed him in the heavens? The Buddhas, right? Or whatever. The Rigdons, right? Which are the special Shambhala Buddhas, basically. That, again, have their weird mythological sort of connection with, pre-Buddhist Bun tradition in Tibet. And eventually I want to get into the mythology of things, because it gets pretty wacky, and the clearly cultural stuff. But we're not talking about that today. But this picture is consistently painted, right? The heavenly appointed one who is to come down and create an enlightened society by joining heaven and earth, right? So we're down here on earth, and that's not a bad thing because the human is the one in between earth and heaven is sort of whatever enlightenment. But it gets an awful lot like of Abrahamic theism. Actually, there's a very strong sort of God character, which is the Rigdons, who have chosen Trungpa in the case of what we're going to talk about today, but the Sakyong lineage overall, and all of these Sakyongs are heavenly appointed. It sounds a lot like the divine right of kings, in sort of Western tradition. It's actually not that different, only their God is not God. It's the non-materialistic God. And it's actually pretty ridiculous when you start to try to separate those things out and make heads or tails of it in any way. But the point here is that these heavenly beings who make no mistakes, right? That's the thing, right, with crazy wisdom. It might seem like they're making mistakes, but they make no mistakes. They make no mistakes. So everything that they do is for the benefit of all beings, whether we can see that or not. And the problem is that we can't see it because we're stupid. That's the thing. But they're so cool, so tough and cool, that they know everything. So that's the leaders, right? They can't make mistakes. They're incapable of making mistakes, and everything they do is a teaching. So every single person that we're going to talk about in a minute here, they needed to go through those things. They needed to be abused in those ways. They needed to have the rug pulled out from under them. It can't be any other way. That's just holding them to the orthodoxy of their own teachings, okay? It can't be any other way. So those people needed to be abused. Or it's not abuse. It's just, I don't know, happy fun time or something. So that's the context that we have to sort of begin with. And there's another element to that context, is that these people were creating enlightened society, right? This was the plan. And we've talked about the enlightened society plan a little bit. But are you starting to see how absurd this actually is? So the perfectly enlightened being who is incapable of making mistakes was sent here to create an enlightened society on earth as an example of good human society to us. Lucky us. Any culture that's going to survive needs to take care of its children. If you're harming your children, then you will have fucked up adults. And if you have a culture that's built entirely of fucked up adults, you get Shambhala. You don't get an enlightened society. You get an abusive mess that's caught in this terrible cycle of abuse. And that is what Shambhala is, always was, and always will be. And that's why this is important that we continue to have this conversation, because we are not done here, folks. A lot of us got out, but there are people who know all of these things who are sending their kids to sun camp right now. They're sending their children to sun camp. It's unfathomable. So anyway, if you're the profound, brilliant, just, powerful, all-victorious, heavenly appointed Sakyong who can do no wrong and is only capable of teaching, and you are tasked with building an enlightened society that will be an example of what good human society can be on earth, you can't then say, oh, we made a mistake. We didn't realize that our students were going to misunderstand our teachings and then abuse the most important members of our society, the children. You can't do it. So this is kind of the point of this channel, and we're going to hit this over and over and over again. If what they're saying is accurate, if what they're describing is accurate, then they are not who they say they are, because they're not doing it. They clearly have made mistakes. And so when the Sakyong said, oh, I have a drinking problem, Sakyong dumbass, when he said, I have a drinking problem, it's like, no, that's not an out for you, because you don't make mistakes. You're the profound, brilliant, just, powerful, all-victorious Sakyong. And the reason why you drink is to teach us about the nature of our minds. You know how I know that? That's what you taught us. That's what you taught us. So you can't say, oh, I sometimes I drink and I make mistakes. You don't make mistakes. That's what you taught us. And there's just no way around that. So when Trungpa was building this community, there's no out. There's no out. The enlightened being had to know that those children would be harmed. He had to, because he was creating that culture, right? It all comes from the top. So either he knew that those children were going to be abused, and that's what they needed to become enlightened. That's what you have to defend, Shambhala people. That's what you have to defend. The child abuse was necessary for enlightenment. That's the only way. You must defend that point. Otherwise, none of it's real. So, that's actually the main point that I want to make in this video. So let's look into some of the enlightened behavior of the gurus and the behavior that they encouraged in their community. Because one of the things that you can tell from this report is that anything that the students were doing, he knew. He knew what they were doing. In my time, things like this definitely existed, but they were much better covered up. They were much better hidden. And there was enough, actually. Again, like it's amazing to me how much I was able to sort of close my eyes to. But we're talking about the early days. This report will cover the more or less from the beginning of Vajradhatu Shambhala up until about the time when I joined. And let's just, in order to keep the video relatively short, suffice it to say that it didn't stop. It just went kind of better underground. And apparently, from what I understand, it still hasn't stopped. And I actually don't think that it can. And any of you who think that having a woman in charge is going to help, I think you're mistaken. So, good timing. So let's take a look at this report. This report was written, it was submitted anyway to the Vermont, I don't know exactly when it was written. It was compiled before, obviously. But it was submitted to the Vermont Superior Court on December 4th, 2025. So like about a month ago at this point. And regarding the case of Bihari versus John Weber and Shambhala USA, which is an ongoing civil case that has to do with sexual assault and negligence. I don't know the details. I know that the case is still ongoing. And so we will be watching to see what the results are. It's worth noting that before this case got started, the state of Vermont made a change to the law that removed the statute of limitation for childhood sexual abuse. And as far as I can tell, it's my understanding, and I may be mistaken, but it's my understanding that Shambhala actually fought tooth and nail to avoid the passage of this law, and actually did, and this is in the document, I think, here. I will link to the document in either the description or a pinned comment. Shambhala actually tried to get the case dismissed based on the idea that the change to the statute of limitations law in Vermont was unconstitutional. So, and this is one of at least two, and I think maybe three active lawsuits against either Shambhala and or the Ladrong, and they really are using they know they're going to lose, some of them at least. So they're using every tactic they can to stall and delay and basically making things difficult on the victims rather than just owning it, because they'd probably be destroyed financially. But like, doing what's right is not what matters in this case. And I think for those people who are like, well, maybe I should go to my local Shambhala center because, I have nowhere else to meditate because my teacher is far away. No, don't give them a moment of your time or a nickel of your money. They're actively stonewalling victims to this day. So that's what you would be getting involved in if you were to go to a Shambhala center. And that's why we need to keep speaking up. And I hope some of you will come speak up too. I know how hard it is. So like I've been in contact with a couple of people who expressed a little bit of interest in sharing some of their stories. And then I haven't heard much back from them. And I totally understand. It's hard for me to follow up because I have a full-time job, and it's hard for me just to make these videos. So then I have to push or not push, but try and figure out a way to kind of be proactive in sort of helping other people to share. It's a lot. It's a lot. So if you can do that and you're willing to do that, I think we can, for most of you, probably recording something that we can edit so that you're not worried about saying things, that you don't want to have on camera, rather than a live stream we could do, or I can write things down and read them for you. We can do it anonymously. So I'm going to put out another call for that because I think for example, if you guys could read my emails, if you could read all of the emails that I've gotten from people, you would start to understand just how completely endemic this is. There's no getting this out of Shambhala, I don't believe. And if people understood, because it was just like all these teachers that I knew, all these people, I didn't know that I've heard from 3 or 4 different people who have done care and conduct reports on this one guy, for example. And it's like, I had no idea that was going on, but like it happened like multiple times, and so this is not going away. Anyhow. Yeah. So, but if you can't, I understand, because I understand how hard it is to tell my own story, so I can't push anybody too hard. But if you all could know what I knew, you would understand, this isn't going away. This is just part of the thing. And it's awful. It's awful what happened to people. But I'm going to digress if I'm not careful. So anyway, going back to this report, I'm going to try and read through some of it. It's long. I will link to it. I'm not exactly sure. I'm just forcing myself to do this, so I'm not exactly sure where we're going to go with this. But we're going to start by going through it. So, our investigation focused on the role of Vajradhatu culture in enabling and perpetuating the sexual assault and/or exploitation of children and minors. We defined culture as a set of shared, taken for granted, implicit assumptions that a group holds and that determines how it perceives, thinks about, and reacts. In other words, the way we do things here. We accepted the commonly held tenet that the culture of an organization is strongly influenced by the words and actions of the leaders. Yes, of course, of course. In other words, it starts at the top. And I read this right after I did my last video where I said it starts at the top or something very, very close to that. So I was a little bit like, okay, they're drawing the same conclusions that I am. And I was actually going to do a video on the permissive sexuality and sort of cavalier attitudes towards alcohol that the community had sometime later. And so now I kind of have to fold that into this because this is basically saying the same thing, essentially. They don't mention alcohol a lot, but actually I don't think they mention alcohol much at all, but it's actually pretty critical to this whole problem. Anyway, the drunkenness. So we included the 20 victims' narratives. So this is the 20 people that, now we're talking about everything in this is over 20 years old. Like 1995 was the last incident that they have here or something like that. So that means like this is what they could find that was like between 30 and 50 years old. So imagine what they couldn't find. And you can imagine that quite a bit did take place after this. So I think it's best to just expand the scope as far as how you think about this. So we included the 20 victims' narratives in loose chronological order in the prior section. Background Vajradhatu 1975 to 1995. There we see a consistent pattern of sexual abuse and or predation on children and minors aged 9 to 18 by adults, primarily in their 30s and 40s. And keep in mind, some of these things were not technically illegal. There's incidents where there are like 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds who are getting involved with older people, both men and women, by the way. And they're not technically crimes because in Colorado, the age of consent was 15, and so on and so forth. So like the whole age of consent thing can be very, very tricky because it's like what magic switch flips when somebody turns 17 or 18 or depending on how it's defined. It's a little more complicated than all of that, but at the same time I think that pointing these out in this context as being highly inappropriate relationships and sort of also painting a picture of the culture of Shambhala it's pretty necessary. So they do acknowledge in the report that a few of those things may not have been technically criminal, but most of them are. And yeah, so I just wanted to acknowledge that for the people who say, well, 17, it's legal. It's like, yeah, it's legal. And in some cases it's not, like if it's a teacher and in Shambhala it gets really weird with the whole like position of authority thing, because like you could be like somebody's supervisor at one program and then be their subordinate at another program. And so like that was a messy mess. But like none of that's an excuse, because there's a lot of horrible and clearly not appropriate things that like they're unambiguous. So even if the roles and relationships in Shambhala were not ambiguous or were ambiguous, the whether or not something was appropriate often was not, and they still went ahead and did the inappropriate things. So it's not an excuse, but it's worth pointing out that a few of these things are not technically crimes. I don't think I'm going to read all 20 of them, but I'm going to kind of read a few because it just gives an idea. It's also tricky to read them because the names are all redacted. So it's like redacted talked to redacted, and then redacted did this, and redacted said that. It can get a little confusing. It's easier if you read them, but maybe you don't want to read all of this. But there are ones like this that I think are really necessary, which is actually the first one. Redacted was abused from age 9 to 14 by an older man from 1975 to 1980 in the presence and with the assent of her mother. It was accepted and common knowledge in the community. Redacted, that's the first redacted, the abuser, was co-director of Austin, Texas Dharmadhatu and went on to become a director in Vajradhatu, Boulder. So-and-so attempted to grope redacted in 1979 by pushing her in a closet at the Kalapa Court, Boulder, the headquarters of Vajradhatu. She was 13. Her abuser lived on the premises with his wife. He was notorious for going after young girls. And this is a theme. And this happened when I was there. It would be like, oh yeah, he used to really go after the young girls a lot, but thankfully he got married, so I think it slowed down a little. And it was just kind of like normal. And in my first video I talked about how young I was when I went in, and you would hear people talking about these things like it's normal. Oh yeah, he's a real horn dog. Got to watch out for him. And it's like, what? And it was, and sort of what's the line between sort of cavalier, sort of free love, kind of hedonistic sex between consenting adults, and then, kind of working your way down when you're already young. It's you start to notice, like, because the thing is, in this video we've got like a lot of 30-year-old men hitting on 16-year-old girls. When I was there, it was 50-year-old men, because it was the same men by and large. Different girls, they were the same age. And yeah, ugh. Yeah, but when you come in and you're 21 and everybody's like, oh yeah, ha ha ha, it was literally like that, but it wasn't like, oh, he had sex with that 13-year-old girl, ha ha ha. Like, it wasn't like that by the time that I was there. But there was still this just incredibly cavalier attitude, and it was like, well, you were supposed to have lots of sex. Like, whether you were a man or a woman, that was normal. And so it wasn't just these sort of abuse situations. It was, everybody switching partners, and like, oh, these two used to be a couple and these two used to be a couple, and now they've flipped, and it all happened overnight, and all kinds. It was just, the whole culture was just screwy. And remember the theme here. So let's say Trungpa needed to shake people out of their puritanical sort of norms in order to give them an opportunity to be tantric or whatever. It's like, and he didn't think about the children. He didn't think about what effect that would have on the society that you build if you turn a bunch of kids into suicidal junkies. It's because he wasn't enlightened. It's because he didn't know. It's because he was a narcissistic asshole. And I know that that's hard for a lot of people I really like to accept, because then you have to kind of say, oh, I dedicated my life to a bullshitter, but you did. And that's just the way it is. So anyway, so these first two are children. And the mother was aware in one case. So this was culturally all right. There was, let's see here. It's just more and more of the same thing. Redacted was repeatedly assaulted when he was around 12 at RMDC in 1980, while his mother was involved in intense meditation practices for 3 months, seminary. At the age of 14 in 1982, he returned and was again assaulted by 2 different men. In 1982, he attempted suicide there. His mother consulted Trungpa about what to do. He advised her to do another 3-month retreat and leave the the victim, in a psychiatric facility, which she did. He committed suicide in 2019. And I was thinking about this. I think I might know who that is. But I was thinking about this. If you were in Shambhala for a long time, how many people do you know who committed suicide? Do you think it's anywhere near the national average wherever you live? Of course it's not. It's way, 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 way higher, because that's what happens to people who are abused. So it's so fascinating to me that they talk about breaking the chain, breaking the cycle of samsara. You are the cycle of samsara, assholes. Like, you break it by leaving. You break it by doing what we're doing here. You break it by putting a stop to that shit. So fucking frustrating. Here's one. I wanted to get at least one of these. A member of Trungpa's inner circle engaged in a relationship that involved sexual touching. This began at an encampment. She was 16. He was 33 and married. They began having penetrative sex once she turned 17 with Trungpa's permission. Based on the composition of the 1988 Vajradhatu board, we have inferred he was on the Vajradhatu board at the time. And there's a couple of these where these people claim to have asked Trungpa's permission to start sexual relationships with, again, young people. These are people who were technically above the age of consent. But so Trungpa was completely on board and aware of this. And of course, we have the stuff from the Uncoverage podcast, which is mentioned also in this report, with him making out with 13-year-old girls in front of everybody and nobody doing anything. So this was the culture of Shambhala, folks. There's just no way around it. Those of you who consistently defend Trungpa, like, were you sleeping? Did you not see this? Maybe you didn't see this. That's the thing. Because if you remember from what I've told you about my experience as Kusung, a lot was hidden from us very successfully. And had I understood the scope of all of these things, I would have been gone much, much sooner. But because of the way things were hidden from us, actually took me 20 years to figure it out. And it took very, very brave people coming out in public and being attacked and gaslit and honestly tormented to this day, almost 10 years after having come out, and just enduring that. So I hope that won't go to waste. I hope that won't be in vain, and that maybe we can actually put a stop to this. But take your fucking kids out of sun camp, folks. Take your kids out of sun camp. There's some sun camp stuff in here. There's some mention of sun. There's just so much. Yeah, you'll have to read it yourself. I'm not going to read all of these. And one of the things that's mentioned here pretty extensively is the sort of irresponsible drunken staff at Sun Camp. And keep in mind that we're talking about, like, 20 something year olds, or even like people who are just barely 18, 19, who are the camp counselors to teenagers and children. And that's, normal that's, but usually there are also, and there were probably a couple of older adults, one of whom is notorious for having slept with campers. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I don't know if I know this video sucks, but like, I can barely get through this, guys. I can barely get through this. I hope to do more planning in the future so that I can sort of protect my own mind from having to think about these things. But there's mention in the report. I probably, maybe I'll find it here later. But I remember when in 1995, my very first summer up at, I think it was 1995. Yeah, it must have been 95. It was my very first summer up at Shambhala Mountain Center, and we were smoking a bunch of weed, and like people ran out of weed, and it was like, somebody go up to Sun Camp. And it was literally like nobody did it, but that was the joke, was like, go up to Sun Camp where all the drugs are. Like, and it wasn't the staff necessarily. It was the 15-year-old campers doing mushrooms and things like that. Um, and I do think that they have sort of gradually cleaned things up a little bit, but all this stuff about 17-year-olds and so on is, there was a program called Rites of Warriorship that happened at the end of Sun Camp for the older campers. That was like a graduation. And, they took them outside and did some sort of vision questy kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know the details. I never did it. So, but afterwards they would have a ceremony, and they would basically be declared Shambhala adults. And among the things, and this is no doubt about this because there were so many Sun Campers who were adamant about this. And you used to get shit if you were the Rusung, because if you tried to do underage drinking, like, because the drinking age in the U.S. is 21, you'd have fucking Sun Camp graduates who were like, I'm allowed to drink in Shambhala. I went to Rites of Warriorship, and at 17, you're an adult, you're allowed to drink. So that probably didn't help as far as, kind of adding to the abusive situation. People were told that a 17-year-old is an adult. And there is this thing in the liturgies you may have noticed, like, because it's not just the women, it's all the characters. Shiva Ukar, the peaceful white light deity of the Werma sadhana, is a male deity who is 16 years of age. There's this sort of fetishization of youth and virility and sort of thing. It's, the Great Eastern Sun. It's the rising sun, right? The setting sun is bad, like, and so youth is kind of the rising sun in that way. But it gets pretty creepy. And this is not just a problem in Shambhala. This is a Tibetan Buddhism problem. I'm just going to mention this briefly, but I will, because otherwise this will go on for hours and hours, but it's related. I received an essay that an old friend of mine wrote, and she is still a Tibetan Buddhist, and I totally respect that, and she has decided that she wants to try to protect children, within the Tibetan Buddhist and monastery context. And she's done some pretty decent work, it seems like, and gotten a lot of information. But I don't see how it can be fixed. But that's, anybody who's trying to reform one of these situations, like, I'm on your side as far as, like, I hope you have success. And if it is possible and I'm wrong, more power to you. But I wanted to read just one little section called Firsthand Testimony from her article that's about largely in the monastic situations, but child abuse that happens within Tibetan Buddhist communities overall. So I once dated a former monk from a very famous monastery in Bodhnath, Nepal. He got out, married, had children. He told me that sexual abuse was rampant. Like the testimony from a high Tibetan teacher called Kalu Rinpoche. He was young. My former monk friend was when he was young, my former monk friend was forced to perform oral sex on senior monks, proctors, lopans, and kempos. He said that this abuse was systematized and the children are offered in-kind favors for performing sexual acts, like the ability to travel with the lama, since they are essentially trapped in their institution, trapped there in an institution and cannot leave. And remember, they just take these kids when they're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old and throw them in a monastery. Another former Western monk friend who is now a psychiatric nurse practitioner in Brooklyn said that he had a client who was a former Tibetan monk. The man had PTSD, and he said every night the Gompa monastery, at the Gompa, as soon as the lights went out, it was rape. He always tried to hide, but he could not. A Lama friend of mine told me firsthand that there was so much abuse in Rumtek that he tried to run away. He said that he'd get to the end of the street and there would be nowhere else for him to go. So he'd have to go back. And he said that he suffers today from psychological problems, but at least he is free. It just goes on and on. And there's some mention in this article of the Catholic Church as well. We know about the abuse scandals in the Catholic Church. And one of the things that she says in this is, I don't know, maybe it's just as bad. And I want to say it's probably worse, actually. Because interestingly, the Catholic Church, the big problem in the Catholic Church is the cover-ups and the scandals are the cover-ups and the hiding it and the sort of moving priests around and that sort of thing. But when you look at the rate of abuse in the Catholic Church, it's actually about the same as what you would see in schools and daycares and other situations that are not religious at all. And I feel like what she's describing in this article, and definitely what happened in Shambhala, were just way above the national average for similar institutions. And my focus is not on Tibetan monasteries, it's on Shambhala, and there's just no question to me that the abuse rate, the suicide rate, the rate of alcoholism and addiction is just way higher than in the general population. And so, again, the profound, brilliant, just, powerful, all-victorious Sakyong warrior who was sent from heaven by the Rigden kings to teach us how to create an enlightened society had no idea how to build a culture. He had no idea how to build a culture. So they are disqualified. Completely, 100% disqualified. So let's go back, and I'm not going to read any more of the there's so much more in this. I may wind up reading one or two more. There's one that is fascinating because like anybody who's been in Shambhala can tell who it is, even though it's redacted. Yeah, so there's a list of things that Trungpa did in here, many of which we've already covered. We might mention some of those, but let's see here. To reach a conclusion, we identified and analyzed the following patterns that arose from our investigation. Whether Shambhala was a high-demand group with an authoritarian, charismatic leader who held total power, required total loyalty, and where no accountability, dissent, or criticism was permitted. And that's basically true. You could criticize a little bit, and there were like tiny moments of pushback that happened with the Sakyong, at least, though I doubt you could do it much at all with Trungpa. I do think there were like little people thought they were giving him feedback more than anything, but they weren't really. But this is basically true. So whether the disdain for moral or ethical standards led to the normalization of deviant behavior, such as the excessive use and normalization of alcohol and permissive sexual relations, and whether the organization knew of or willingly disregarded those abuses that were occurring. So we know they knew. We know they knew. We know. We didn't know at the time as much as we do now, but we definitely know now. Disdain for moral or ethical standards. That's actually really interesting, because the question of morality is a really fascinating one, and I won't take it to the larger sort of worldwide kind of global view of that, but like the disdain for morality was clear. Like Shambhala is an explicitly amoral organization. Not immoral necessarily, but definitely amoral. Basically, the idea is that morality is bullshit. So I think that fits pretty well with a disdain for moral or ethical standards. There's a fantastic quote in here from Zhangsar Kensei. There's a couple. What an asshole, Zhangsar Kensei Rinpoche. What a fucking asshole. So this is from a talk. Let me see here. I gotta find it real quick. Yeah, here we go. So this is me. This is me he's talking about here. if an impure perception, such as criticism of one's guru. So criticizing your guru is an impure perception because they are above criticism. Remember, they're perfect, can't make a mistake. So the only conclusion you can draw is that these people needed to be sexually abused. Only conclusion you can draw and still be a Vajrayana student. If an impure perception, such as criticism of one's guru, is made deliberately and consciously, deliberately? Like I chose to do that? Or did I just see him being an asshole? See, this is the kind of shit they do. It's awful. Anyway, deliberately and consciously. And if it then goes on to become a well-organized, choreographed public discussion, it's not very well organized, and I don't know if it's choreographed, but it very much is public. With no room for amendment or correction, it constitutes a total breakage of Samaya. Well, there's room for amendment or correction. So, Dzongsar, come tell me, why did those people need to be sexually assaulted? Come explain it to me, and then I will amend and correct my mistakes. You come on my show, we'll do a live stream, and you can tell me why those people needed to be sexually abused. What did that do for them? Why did we need to create a culture with an unbreakable chain of abuse within its membership for generations to come? Why did we need to do that in order to create enlightened society? What am I missing here? Come tell me. And then I will amend and correct so that I can be saved from my total breakage of Samaya. Because, I mean, you also are the embodiment of compassion in this world, right? So, don't you have a little compassion for me? Help me figure it out. Hey, if you convince me, I'll become your greatest mouthpiece. Because if you can convince me why that sexual assault was necessary, all that abuse, then, I'll be a great PR man for you guys, because obviously you have the enlightened stuff. But you don't, because you're a bullshitter. And so fuck off. Anyway, breaking Samaya, we talked about that. That's a big one. Okay, so there's the whole list of things that Trungpa did that basically what they're doing here is they're giving heaps and heaps and heaps of examples of how harmful behavior was normalized, how dissension was not allowed, and so on and so forth. And just to give you, the quick hits, Leslie stories of the cat torture. There's the dog torture that's in the Mahasiddha and his idiot manservant book that he thought was great when it was going on. Kissing the 12-year-old at the children's party. We mentioned that one already from Uncoverage. Modeling sexual promiscuity by having open sexual relationships with many women, at least 2 of whom were teenagers. Recklessly advising the regent. Oh yes, that's a good one. Don't tell people you've got AIDS, and they won't get it because you're doing Vajrasattva practice. These people weren't enlightened, folks. They thought they were enlightened. There's no way around it. They cannot be what they claimed to be because of their own actions. And we're just going to hammer this point over and over and over again. And, hopefully we'll make some sense of it. Ignoring credible reports of abuse, encouraging and condoning predatory sexual relationships between minors and older men and women. And yes, older men and women. It was men abusing men. It was men abusing girls. It was women abusing boys. The whole thing. And men abusing boys. Everybody was abusing everybody. It was a great party. And that's kind of what they fucking still think. They're like, yeah, but it was a great party. It's sick. It's so sick. Encouraging parents to send their children to retreat centers where there was no safeguarding of children. Yes. So I mentioned this, I think, in one of my early videos, but I showed up out of nowhere with my 2 friends, and they were like, you guys are going to be in charge of the children. And they gave us, there was a member of the community who was older than us, who was kind of like our advisor. So we had like a reference point, but they just left us alone with the kids like 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day, whatever it was, for weeks on end. Like we could have done anything, and nobody would have known, because it would have taken about 5 minutes to figure out the culture of silencing if we were actually predators, because we already kind of, predators kind of already know, so like go into that situation, they'd be like, oh, fucking A. Like it, all it had to have happened was for us to have been the wrong people, and that summer could have added a whole bunch of people to this list. It's so filthy and irresponsible. And you're walking around, oh, woo, the profound, brilliant, just, powerful, all victorious. Fucking idiots. I apologize. I get very angry. I get very angry when I think about this stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, the regent, you know, it's just so irresponsible. So then, yeah, normalization of harmful behaviors, alcohol and sex. Trungpa was routinely described as an alcoholic, at the very least a heavy drinker who often drank alcohol before his public lectures, before, during, and after. Um, oh, yes, alcohol as medicine or poison is one of the chapters in Heart of the Buddha. And it really sounds like a rationalization to me these days. I may go over that one at some point. Because yeah, it's easier for me to get I can easily get my hands on the public texts. I am gonna do some deconstruction, I think, of some private text, but I have to get my ducks in a row, because I will get copyright strikes if I do that, and I will win, but I have to be ready. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do, guys. We got a lot of work to do. So your support is critical. Help me out here. I don't know how. Just help me out. Let's see. But the more critical issue is the culture of drinking that developed within the Vajradhatu community as it followed his lead. This permission for alcohol consumption and drunkenness seeped into the community. Students saw Trungpa drunk on many occasions. He drank from morning until night and frequently gave public talks while drunk. As Redacted said, the culture of Shambhala involved more drinking than she had ever seen, even among the undergraduates at the University of Colorado. Oh, yeah. And also undergraduates don't have enough time. Like, you become a more skilled drinker, when you've got 10, 12 years of heavy drinking under your belt. Alcohol was not reserved for those who were over 21. As I mentioned, they're going to talk about some of that stuff with Sun Camp. That I already mentioned. Okay, here's a good one. Redacted informed us that a Shambhala member who was over 20 years older than her, began what she described as an affair. Oh, no, than him, began what she described as an affair with him at 16. She was 16, he was older. Yeah, this is where the redacted gets tricky. Redacted sent Redacted a package of heroin from her home in Germany, along with instructions on how to use it. Oh, yeah, they were eventually married several years later. I think she was the older one in this case. Consequently struggled with drug addiction throughout his life, mainly cocaine and heroin. In 1987, while visiting his mother over Christmas in Nova Scotia, he recalls being strung out and feeling very bad about himself. At that point, he describes himself as a 19-year-old coke-whore. Yeah, so it was actually an older woman and a younger man. This is where the redacted gets a little challenging. Yeah, it just goes on. Oh, yeah. Redacted attended Sun Camp retreats, one at Carmicholing, one in Canada. It was there that she recounts things being out of control. At Sun Camp, they were encouraged to drink, smoke, and do drugs. This behavior was normalized. The staff were often drunk. The older teenagers were drunk. There was no supervision, and there were inappropriate sexual situations. Redacted was also plied with alcohol by someone, I'm not sure if they were supposed to, I'm going to avoid that, during her sexual assault in the presence of adults. So-and-so jumped out of a second-story window at the Calabar Court in Halifax after taking LSD and suffered a traumatic brain injury. On and on and on we go, folks. So let me see here. I thought of something else. Oh, yeah. The underage drinking and so forth. This happened in, I think this was my second summer at Shambhala Mountain Center. I remember this only happened that year, but they would serve these kind of sake punch at the stupa fundraisers, and the stupa fundraisers were these. Everybody loved the stupa fundraiser, even if you didn't have any money, because it meant you got to go get drunk for free. And then obviously they would get people drunk, and they would spend more money, and getting people drunk was an integral part of Shambhala's fundraising strategy. And anytime you didn't get people drunk during a fundraiser, you didn't make as much money. I actually discovered when I was at Casa Huerma that you could totally get people to donate tons of money without getting them drunk. All you had to do was have a good pitch, but it was easier to get them drunk, and that was the culture anyway. But at this one stupa fundraiser in 1996, I remember being shocked because we only had one student in our childcare program at the beginning of the year, and so was my one student. She was 12 years old, and she came up with two pitchers, and she said, "Alcohol or no alcohol?" And she was 12 at the time, and so they had the children running around serving the drinks, including walking around with a pitcher full of sake. And how many of them do you think took the last pitcher with them and walked away towards the end and went and drank it themselves, or poured a little bit in there, or gave it to their friends as they were giving it to their friend's mom? So yeah, lots of drunken kids. And it's like, yeah, you get caught up in that. That's the culture. So this whole like, oh, it was our fault bullshit, it's like it came from the top. And it came from the top in a way that was just recklessness. It was just total recklessness. And you can't have it both ways. You can't be the profound, brilliant, just, powerful, all-victorious Sakyong sent from heaven by the Rigdons to join heaven and earth and establish a good society on earth and not have any idea how to actually, what matters in a culture. You just can't have it both ways. I'm going to say that again and again and again. You can't have it both ways, folks. So anyway, yeah, age disparate relationships, lots of that. Again, because youth was fetishized. So it was like, of course, you're going to nail a 16-year-old. It's like, that's the pinnacle. Because keep in mind also, there's something that's never mentioned in this article is that, is orgasm and sexual fulfillment, or however you want to describe it, were also corresponded directly with enlightenment, tamalgi shepa, TGS, ordinary mind. The flash of ordinary mind was considered to be the same as at the moment of orgasm. So you could sort of repeat your pointing out instruction by having orgasms. And so everybody wanted to give each other TGS. We're going to fuck each other into enlightenment. And then you add like 16-year-olds into the iconography, and it's like, and then you do it in front of people, and then like everybody's like, well, I wonder why we have this problem. Like, what can we do? Fucking burn it down. That's what you can do. Burn it the fuck down. Any of the good stuff you can do elsewhere without all the rape. Like, burn it the fuck down. Let's see here. Is there anything else? You should read this entire thing, but I don't know if there's anything else that I want to go through. I'm going to go down to the conclusion and just read through that. So let's see here. In 2018, the Transition Task Force, the governing body of Vajradhatu Shambhala, after the prior council had resigned in the face of yet another sexual abuse scandal, asked Pema Chodron to address the embedded patterns of sexual abuse and abuse of power. Embedded patterns. Hey, a little bit of self-awareness. Now burn it down. Within the organization. Although this request and her response came long after the last incident of abuse in our report, it highlights an unbroken line of sexual abuse, sexual predation, and abuse of power within Vajradhatu Shambhala. In her letter to the community, children reflected that the days of Chogyam Trungpa were characterized by a lot of drinking and a lot of sex. Further, she noted that despite the upheaval caused by the regent's ethical, moral, and potentially criminal lapses in 1989, things didn't change going forward. As she says, sexual behavior was considered no problem. The culture of looseness was systemic. The upshot was, as we are finding, that this culture gave permission to various individuals to do some very harmful things to women of all ages. We find children's comments to be accurate. Using the methodology we described above, we identified victims of sexual abuse of children and the predation of minors in Vajradhatu. We spoke to the victims we could find, as well as any witnesses who could corroborate victim accounts and or give us background information. Through this process, we identified 19 credible incidents of abuse and predation in the relevant time period. Then we identified and analyzed the consistent patterns that ran through the victim narratives. We conclude, as children stated, that the culture of Vajradhatu gave permission to various individuals, some of them with the highest levels of leadership, to do so, to do some very harmful things to women and men of all ages, but especially for the focus of our investigation to children and minors. We conclude that Vajradhatu was a high-demand group with an authoritarian, charismatic leader who held total power and required total loyalty, an organization where there was no accountability and neither dissent nor criticism was permitted. We also conclude that Vajradhatu exhibited a disdain for moral and ethical standards which enabled the normalization of deviant behavior such as excessive use of alcohol and permissive sexual relationships between teenagers and much older adults. We conclude that the organization, through at least one of its board of directors and one of its high-level management directors and its founder, Trungpa, was aware of this child abuse and predation of minors from 1979 onward and failed to take the slightest action to safeguard the victims who were children. Instead, not just children, but fuck me. You can't be creating enlightened society and not protect your children. You're a phony. Both of you. And the one coming after, they're all phonies. They can't do it. Burn it down. Burn it the fuck down. Instead, Trungpa gave permission for the predation of at least one 16-year-old to continue. We also conclude that much of the sexual predation of children and minors took place in the plain view of adults who did not intervene, call the police, or notify anyone in authority within the organization. When an adult did notify Eric Holm of sexual assault of her son by senior teachers at Karmacholing, there was no indication that anything was ever done because at least one of those senior teachers remained in the inner circle of the organization well into the 2020s. So yeah, they didn't go to the police, right? And so that was the thing, right? That was how the Kosong was actually used, and I didn't fully understand this. Is like, and not just the Kosong, but the civilian care and conduct people and everything else. You would do what you were told was right, and in my case, like I said, I was very young, so I was 21 when I came in. I became indoctrinated into that system, and I felt like I've done what is right when I told, a senior person about something. And it took me 20 years to realize, or not 20, but however the hell long that was. Yeah, it was like, 15 years later that I finally came out and told the story because I realized that it wasn't a real society. That's the thing. It wasn't a real society. Because, the Kosong talk a good game, and I will talk about the Kosong more. The Kosong talk a good game about, stopping threats with non-aggression and peacefulness and whatever. But it's like, they just go until they run out of ideas, and then they call the fucking cops, It's like it's not real. It's just I really thought it was real. It's not real. It's just not real. Into the 2020s. Despite the 2 decades of well publicized sexual misconduct that we investigated under the leadership, well publicized sexual misconduct that we investigated under the leadership of Trungpa and the Regent, we note another 2 decades of continued allegations and sexual misconduct followed. That was my time. This points to an organization where misconduct is not just an anomaly tied to one individual, but rather a systemic issue of Vajradhatu's structures and norms, and a culture that enables and overlooks abuse and protects the abusers. We conclude that these abuses were caused by and perpetuated by Vajradhatu's culture and extreme lack of care that was demonstrated for children and minors, and burn it the fuck down. There's nothing good there. There's absolutely nothing good there. So I understand if you don't want to read this, but if you do have the time and the wherewithal to read this one and Dawn's that I will link again, either in a pinned comment or in the description, all you need to do is just watch the videos on my channel, and that should be enough already for anybody who has any doubt as to whether or not they should have walked away from Shambhala. You should feel comfortable now. But we're not done. I don't think we're anywhere near done. I've been discussing some things with a friend of mine, and understanding just how horrific it is. Because see, some of these, so the thing is, when these were children, who were abused by community members, it's not the same as people who entered into a Vajrayana relationship with a teacher having been directly abused by that teacher. I don't fully understand. I don't know that I ever will fully understand just how horrible that is, but I have been being sort of educated on that and gradually understanding a little more and more, by talking with someone who's very articulate about it. And it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. So we're going to take a crack at that. We're going to try that. So that's basically what I have to say about this. There's a little bit more. I just want to reiterate. You can't say we were young and crazy and crazy things happened to us, and that was all okay because we were building this enlightened society that was so important. For one thing, your enlightened society has fallen to shit. It will never be. The Shambhala organization is never going to create an enlightened society, even if it's around in 100 years. It's not going to have anything to do with enlightened society. If enlightened society is ever created, Shambhala is not gonna do it, because you can't, because you're full of shit. But that's the thing, like you can't neglect your children and build a perfect society. You can't be the beacon of a good human society and not take care of your children. You can't do it. And again, I like to expand this out. This, what we've looked at today, is just the sexual abuse. Let that sink in. What about the neglect? What about all the people whose children weren't sexually assaulted or abused, who spend all their time following Trungpa around, going on retreats, imagining, rainbow lint flying out of their bellies, when they should have been playing with their kids. Because that's one thing, because a lot of these kids were my age and sometimes a little older, a little bit younger when I was growing up, and a ton of them were neglected as fuck. And they may not have been felt up or molested or sexually abused or in some way, though they probably had something happen, even if it was a little thing. But a ton of them were neglected. And not all of them. some people's relationships with their parents were yippee skippy, but they knew stuff was happening, but it didn't happen to them. And sure, some of those kids got through unscathed, but between the sexual abuse and the neglect and the I'm a Vajra asshole, just kind of general abusiveness that came with Shambhala, like I bet like it's a slim minimum who came through unscathed, you know. So we'd love to hear from more of you guys too. There could be a whole. I mean, I'm not qualified to do the Dharma Brat thing. I'm just not qualified. I'm friends with some of those people still now, some of them who went through some horrible things, but I'm not qualified to speak to the sort of broad community that is the Dharma Brats, because it's there were a lot of them and they're not all the same and they didn't have the same experiences, and so that's one I won't be able to tackle. But the point here is like these people are not what they say they are, and their actions prove that they're not what they say they are. So there's no reason that any of you should feel any fear or shame or guilt from having walked away. They're very good con men from a lineage of con men. They are just awful people, and you don't have to feel bad about leaving. So I want to talk a little bit about the channel briefly. Thank you for watching this far. If you're still watching, you're probably part of my core audience. When I started this channel, I didn't. Well, when I started, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I figured it might go on YouTube, and I just needed to say some stuff. And then when I got a little healthier back here in the U.S. and I actually started the channel, what I did was I uploaded all of my videos and I put them up, and I said, well, I'm going to have to come up with something by the time they run out, or I don't have a channel anymore. And I just kind of forced myself to do it. This was the only way that I could do it. This was the only way I could make it work. Because this is really, really difficult, very challenging to do. I dread making the videos just about every week. I spend the whole week thinking about it. Then I go through a whole emotional thing where I don't want to do it, and then I do it, and then I get it done, and then I'm like, that was shit. And then I watch it, and I'm like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I think it was. And then I freak out again, and then I get some comments and stuff, and then I calm down, and then I repeat that cycle every week. And I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just saying like that's the way it is. So if you appreciate what I'm doing, please let me know in the comments. Please send me an email. Please tell me what you want to hear about. Because I feel like if you don't cut out the whole cancer, it's going to grow back. So I don't think we're done here, guys. I don't think we're done. I think we need to share this far and wide. I think I need to hear your stories. I think that would be the most powerful thing, was if we made this our channel instead of my channel. But I know how hard it is. So if you can't or won't, I don't blame you. And as far as, again, building the channel, at this point, like, I've done the best that I can to try and gradually learn about YouTube and sort of get used to talking to the camera. My editing process is simple, but much faster than it initially was. But I didn't know what the channel was about when I started it. And then I sort of started to have a little bit of a sense of like, oh, I understand. I think it's changed. The scope has changed, because at first I was mainly about my audience. I wanted for you guys to not feel guilt, fear, or shame for having left Shambhala, and to feel heard and understood. And maybe we've accomplished that to a certain degree, but I kind of want to take the whole fucking thing down now, and I don't think I can do that. But I wish I could. So I feel like the scope of what I want to do here has changed since I started, and I realized recently that, because I get these emails from people about all the stuff I haven't said. And it's like, yeah, maybe we'll get there. This is an incredibly nuanced situation, and everything ties into everything else. So at a certain point a while back, I realized that there's a certain set of things that I really want to talk about. Big things that are on that list are the kasong, the practice, and living conditions for staff at Shambhala Mountain Center that I haven't talked about already. And there are other things there, but those are three major categories that I want to touch on. And I realized, and I mentioned this in the last video, that this is just the research phase of this channel, right? This is like phase 2, but this is the research phase. This is where I tell you something about all of the different things that I feel like I need to talk about. And this is giving context for those of you who weren't as close, who maybe only went to your local center, who had no idea that any of this stuff was going on. But this is also getting my very beginning thoughts of these things out and down so that I can start to see how big this web is, and the complicated interplay of things. And I think that if I don't just give up, because I may just give up at some point. I might not be able to handle this anymore. But if I don't do that, then once I get through phase 2 of sort of talking a little bit about all of these topics and starting to organize my own thought process about how it all ties together, I'm starting to formulate a much bigger message here. And then that's going to require a lot of time and a lot of planning. Deconstructing Shambhala is another thing that I want to do a little bit more of. But that's going to actually start to require me writing scripts, editing videos more thoroughly. I probably already am spending, maybe 10 hours a week kind of either thinking about, processing, or doing this channel already. Just to get these one video, just to get one video out and to talk to all the people that I've been in touch with. It's got to be at least 10 hours a week at this point, and it's going to get more so. So anyway, that's the idea going forward. And so bear with me, be patient. I'm learning how to say things. I'm trying to learn how to control my own emotions around this so that I can handle it better. I'm trying to maybe use more professional language, and like I said, control my emotions a little bit more. So please bear with me. Give me your suggestions and moral support. Share your stories with me, whether it's just personally in the emails or if you're willing to actually get involved with the channel. I think there's a way that we can make a loud enough noise that it can't not be heard. And I am going to start doing some deconstructing at some point. I have something in mind, but of course, the first project that I think of is like a minimum of like 4 or 5 videos that it would take to get through this project. And it's probably going to get a copyright strike almost instantaneously from Shambhala. So I have to have my ducks in a row and kind of have a plan for that. So every day I feel like escalating this, and every day I feel like giving up. So that's where we're at. And something like this, I'm glad to have finished going through this. I don't think I covered it very well, but yeah, it just sickens me. Yeah, it's whatever. Anyway, fuck those guys. Stay away from Shambhala. It's garbage. It's a mess. It's a scam. And it might even have been a scam with good intentions, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like I said, if you're trying to shoot the arrow off their head and you hit them in the eye, fuck your intentions. But at this point, it's been 50 years. It's been over 50 years of trying to make fetch happen. Enlightened society is not happening, Shambhala. You're just causing harm. And you're just going to cause more harm. It's the same fucking people are still running it. Oh, we split from the Sakyong, but all of his people run our organization. Fuck you. Burn it down. Just walk out. Just walk out. If you own your center, sell it. Take the money, donate it to victims. If you don't own your center, sell everything that you can. Donate the money to victims. You're not helping anybody. Oh, but I need a place to meditate. Try the fucking corner next to your bed. Okay? Fuck those guys. Anyway, now I'm starting to ramble. Thanks for watching. Please do like the video. Please do subscribe. Please do comment. We are building. One of my videos recently got upwards of 900 views. Now I'm starting to average like 300 to 500 is like standard. So people are starting to watch. People are starting to pay attention, and I will try to do my best to make better quality videos with more scripting and more clear through lines or whatever. But yeah, help me out here. I don't know. Send me an email and tell me you want me to keep doing this. Like, put it in the comments. The more comments we have, the more people we reach. And I will get better at making these videos more accessible to the general public. And I will go back. Once I've gone through this phase 2, I will go back and I'm going to start over. And I will do something, but we need to build this base and we need to share, get involved. Like, this is not my channel necessarily. If this becomes our channel and I need to have my own channel, I'll start a new one. I don't care. We'll figure it out. Anyway, Happy New Year. Stay away from Shambhala. Fuck those guys. And do what you can to heal yourself and maybe others. So, thanks for watching. Take care.